Cool. Year ago.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to California Free Radio. I'm Mike Netter, based in the Los Angeles area. Here tonight with Scott Piotr, based in Orange County, and Kurt English is off out and about. I'm stating our locations tonight because as everybody knows, who's been following the news, Los Angeles is on fire. And I want to kind of start with a little bit of an opening story and an opening rant tonight. One, yes, do follow our show, share it all over the place. I'm on at Netter Mike on X, at TaxFighter7 on X, also for Scotty, LinkedIn, Facebook, put it to the Rebuild California groups. In 2007, my house in San Diego actually burned down from the wildfires. And we got out, our family got out okay. We lost everything we owned. And I learned firsthand the horror of when nature reveals its ugly head. I also learned that the process of government in the recovery of victims for that fire and the way that we fight fires is severely broken. That was 18 years ago. And you certainly would think in that 18 years, as we've gone through, well, two governors, three governors, as we have a governor now, Gavin Newsom, who's been warned over and over again that these types of natural disasters will happen. As Los Angeles has gone through a number of administrations, none of them who have done well, we would have learned a lot from our mistakes. But it seems like we haven't. And a prayer and a God bless to the people right now on the other side of town, not even too far from where I currently live, who right now being evacuated. Many friends I have lost homes, and I understand what you're going through. And tonight we want to talk a little bit about how the government is failing and make an example, if you will, of a couple specific politicians. Scott, I'm going to let you weigh in for a second while I do some Facebook posting here.
So here we are. LA is burning down. And what do we have? We have the mayor of LA. And we've got three major fires in LA. We've got a couple of other minor fires. When I say minor, they're only 10 to 30 acres rather than 3,000 acres. And they're burning. And where's the mayor of LA? Where's Karen Bass? Where's our DEI mayor? She's over in Guyana celebrating the coronation of the king over there. And first of all, you got to ask, what the heck is she doing over there, even if there's no natural disaster going on here? But the fact that she's gone and she didn't jump on a plane right away and come back. Now, to her credit, she's jumped on the plane. She's either on the way or she's maybe landed already. But it took her 24 hours to realize, oh, this is a problem. Maybe I should be there. And she's finally getting here as Rick Caruso. Rick Caruso was the guy that ran against Karen Bass for the mayor's office 2 years ago now. And he's just blasting her. In fact, his daughter's house burned down. And he's just blasting her as an incompetent boob. Even Elon Musk has said that she's an incompetent boob. And normally, I wouldn't expect him to weigh in on the mayor's office. But when are we as residents, voters, citizens going to get the idea that they cannot run things? They can't manage the water. They can't manage the forest. They can't modify the fuel there. Mike's house burned down in San Diego, 6 years ago now, 8 years ago? It was a while.
Try 2007. It was 18 years ago this year.
18 years ago. Yet you still feel the pain when you sit there and lose practically everything you own, and you probably were able to recover a lot of stuff out of your house before it actually burned down. No,
nope,
not even a picture.
So very few pictures.
You lose everything, and Yeah, so you remember that 18 years ago. You remember vividly the pain of losing it and the pain afterwards of trying to recover, rebuild. In fact, you didn't even bother rebuilding. You just took the money and left. And I don't blame you. And they haven't learned anything in just the 18 years from that major fire. And that major fire in San Diego, it burned so hot, it burned so many houses down that it basically turned what forest there were to glass. There's nothing left. There wasn't, the old days, the redwood forest, the pine cones, you got to have a fire in order to open them up so they can get seed again. Nope, gone, nada. There was so much fuel in there, they couldn't even regenerate themselves. We've had to go back in there and plant. That's what these fires are doing right now. And it's the government's fault. What are they supposed to do, Mike? What is the first role of government?
Well, the first rule of government should be, and I want to add a third thing to what we talked about, is to provide infrastructure to protect the population, be it crime, provide us with roads, provide us safety from emergencies. And one thing Gavin Newsom, job number one, that's the primary, not to make Sally who wants to be Sam, not to tell us how we should arrange our toy stores. The primary job of government is to keep us safe. Now, I also want to say, too, that the reality of these disasters being declared, and I learned as a person whose house burned down, when Gavin Newsom even said it yesterday, because he can't ignore a camera, and Gavin Newsom is not a great leader is the best way to put it, and that's probably the second biggest understatement you'll see in a second that I'm going to give on this show. He mentioned that Yara Sis Boom Ba declaring a state of emergency means that the agencies, which have been out there fighting fires and ran out of water in Pacific Palisades, get about 75% of their money back that they've spent out of the budget. I want to be perfectly clear here. That state of emergency money does nothing for the people like James Woods, like even Martin Short, who lost their homes. It does nothing for the average person like myself, replacing their possessions, getting them home loans. You saw in Florida when the disasters hit there and FEMA couldn't basically negotiate their way out of a paper bag, that the governor of Florida took over and said, we're going to take care of it. Gavin Newsom does not. But you know what, Scott? I've got one issue with you tonight in the polite. Karen Bass has nothing to her credit, and I want to start this by rolling a video that I put out in my X feed today of Karen Bass landing today. Yes, today. This is about 3 hours ago. And see what you think of the leader of the city of Los Angeles, the second biggest in the United States, and her comments coming back from an African country in a coalition of 4 to watch the anointment of their president. Dan, Mr. Producer, could you roll that?
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position?
I want to see her consider it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens
Watch
today?
this. It's 3 minutes, folks. It's worth watching.
Not a word yet.
Not a word.
Apology for them.
She's going out the wrong doors, you see? Trying to escape.
While this was unfolding back home.
She finally realizes she can't get out that door. So now she's walking to another door.
She can't get away fast enough.
But the reporter's following.
That's right.
Why is it this guy's got an English accent, Mike?
Good question.
This guy's persistent. He
Let
keeps
me ask
going.
you just again, have you anything to say to the citizens today as you return?
Hold on one second.
Madam Mayor, just a few words for the citizens today as you return to.
Get out the door. All right.
She couldn't
Dan,
get
take
out of
yourself
there
off
fast
screen here.
enough.
This is the really scary part, everybody. That's your leader. That's the kind of leadership that was elected without knowing what's going on. This is when a disaster happens, like what happened down in San Diego County and over much of California at that time. At least we had leaders that stepped up and at least spoke. Maybe they didn't do a lot. Scott, weigh in on what Karen Bass had to say.
You mean the fact that she said nothing? No, come on. I mean, really, she's supposed to be the leader of this stinking city. It's LA that's being impacted, and she has nothing to say. She
Not a
can
word.
respond at least and say, hey, I'm sorry that this is going on, but we're mobilizing every asset to help people and to stop this crisis. I mean, that would have been perfect. It would have been short. She didn't have to respond to the reporters, ask of why you were there and why weren't you home and why weren't you taking care of it. She could have been positive on what we're going to do to try and fix it. She has nothing. She couldn't say anything.
What's even more insulting to the people of Los Angeles, and by the way, folks, the difference today versus 2007, believe it or not, way back in the dark ages, we didn't have Facebook and social media. So we had to kind of get what we could get from the press at the time. Now you would
The
think
so-called press, yes.
Yes, so-called press, and we'll get there in 1 second. But here's an obnoxiously insulting part. You just saw Karen Bass come back from being out of the country because apparently a tiny country in Africa needed her more than the citizens of Los Angeles, just like every state in the union and China need Gavin Newsom more than California. And she had nothing to say.
Take them both. Keep them.
Now, Scott, I don't know about you. I don't really keep track of where Karen Bass is. And I frankly, before this disaster hit, did not know she was in Ghana in a country in Africa. I'm sure it was released in the press. I really didn't care. Didn't affect my everyday life. Fair enough?
I understand. We all have better things to do than to follow her.
Let's add some real insult to the people because we are the media like this show today. As Pacific Palisades, Altadena, various canyons, hundreds of thousands of people are being evacuated, 1,000 structures being burned. On the X, formerly known as Twitter feed, there are posts coming from Karen Bass herself. That's last night. Now, it didn't take long for the general public to catch on. That's really quite the trick. Because you can't be Karen Bass because you're in Ghana and it's 2 a.m. and it's not you. It was her staff. But instead of coming forth like a leader and even saying on social media, hey, I'm out of the country and I'll be back soon to help you, the people that elected me to provide you with protection. I'll be back. She didn't do it. Scott, they covered it up until the public called her out on it on social media.
Well, that's part of the reason we do not have a press, right? In fact, what we're doing here on our podcast and the new media that's out there, conservative talk radio and podcasts, et cetera, we're the only ones that are getting the truth out. And the regular media, the mainstream corporate media, only does it when we've made it so embarrassing for them not to do that. So it's ridiculous. It's so bad. It's really sad. So in Pacific Palisades, they started the evacuation early. They actually directed the people to head towards PCH. In other words, they couldn't just go and take one of the back roads out because they couldn't assure that it was going to be safe. The fire was so big, so intense, and blowing towards the coast, everybody was told to go towards PCH. Well, the problem is that everybody did. It was last minute. The traffic was so bad. People had to abandon their cars in order to get away from the flames because the traffic was preventing them from getting out by driving. So these guys are literally running away from the fire in order to escape. That it was that close that they couldn't even evacuate these people in a timely manner. They were caught so flat-footed that they were very lucky that they didn't have loss of life or injury because of it.
Well, they've had a couple lives lost, and let's roll with that for a second, because I saw on the news yesterday, there literally was we call them old folks homes, or we used to, but a care home for whatever the heck we call them now, assisted living, that they couldn't evacuate, and God bless that 100 people weren't killed there. The government, and not the firefighters, not the first responders. It is the job of government to have a plan. There are no exit roads. Scott, much of the land I owned when I lived down in San Diego, including that burned, we had fire roads and exit roads to escape from. There was a plan. There was always an alternate dirt road, and everybody knew where it was. And the rural government came around and told us about it. You would think in the second biggest city in the United States that's surrounded by foliage that the government hasn't cut since Ozzy Osbourne cut his hair, okay, would have some semblance that this is a bad idea. But I want to get back to something that you said before we leave that video about Karen Bass. We are the media now with this show. Scott, did you notice about that interview ambush, if you will, at the airport?
Well, the fact that he was British.
One, yes, he had a foreign accent. Two, he seemed to be the only one there. Now, Scott, as you know, I'm not the brightest bulb in the shed, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that if I was a true member of the press trying to find out what's going on, working for ABC, NBC, any of these stations that call themselves the news media, I would want to hear from Karen Bass from her own lips, not at a staged press conference like that foreign reporter did, or even the LA Times, what the words from her mouth out when she stepped off the plane. Now, my point is to not being that bright is I'm going to go out on a limb here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, my architect friend. There probably aren't that many flights from Guana to LAX each day. I could be off here, but I'm guessing not more than 1, 2 at max. And so the fact that reporter with a British accent was able to find her makes you wonder why no American press took the time and effort to go to find it. Now, I'm also going to say a little bit, because many of these are my friends, in their defense, they won't do that because just as One America News was banned from the Biden White House, a plug because I was on with Matt Gaetz tonight, these people are worried about if they ask the tough questions, they will be banned from the Kremlin, known as the LA City Hall, because they dared to ask Queen Bass the questions that that British reporter probably doesn't give a damn if he ever sees her again. Scott, weigh in.
I have to agree. I mean, first of all, you got either a lazy press or just a press that doesn't want anybody to know how much of a failure our elected leaders are, mainly Karen Bass. I mean, the whole purpose of an executive department in our city government, and that is Karen Bass, is that she's the one that controls the fire department. She's the one that controls the emergency services. She's the one that empowers the DWP, and she's the one that's supposedly managing all of this stuff. DWP failed. We didn't have water. We lose power all over the place. Again, DWP. And, face it, we don't need Newsom's permission to go and defuel these forests, right? To get rid of all the extra underbrush. We've had a couple of wet winters, a year ago in 2022, 2023, and then in 2023 up until the end of the year, it was really wet. Now, starting in the beginning of 2024, it's been drought. We haven't had hardly any rain either in the spring of this year in 2024, all the way through now. And so you had an exceedingly large amount of undergrowth that all grew during this wet season. The more water you get, the more growth you get. It grew.
Is that how it works?
Surprise, surprise. As much as the elected officials would like
You might want to
Yeah.
write that down and send that to the state of California. We'll get back to that one second. Okay.
yeah, get the environmentalists. Write that down, guys. Hey, they had more fuel. There's no reason why they couldn't have hired a couple of goat herds, which is what they do in a lot of steep canyons, to go out there and eat all the undergrowth and get rid of a lot of this excess fuel. And then even when you have an accident, which you mark my words, these fires are going to be found. Now, they may not ever admit it, but they are going to be found to have been started by homeless encampments, where the homeless are out there hiding. They're having fires because it's cold and they're cooking on the fires. And whether they intentionally started the fire or the wind came up and took their fire and made it out of control, doesn't matter. If they had been doing their job and getting rid of the homeless encampments, we might not have had these fires. And then on top of that, they have too much fuel, so it burns like crazy. And then they don't even have enough water to fight it, even if the firemen can get there.
And by the way, another thing I want you take a look at some of the press conferences. I watched one this morning. What was really interesting, Scott, is they have the press conference, the county of LA, and you see this about 7 a.m. on TV or so. And they put I'm going to say, probably a pretty nice guy up there who had no intention of being on television when he started his career for the Department of Public Works. God bless him. And he's up there trying to explain the talk track. Now, let me go on for 1 second here. Thing number one is, he said, well, we ran out of water because this is unprecedented. We've never seen this before. Now, that's his talk track, not this guy talking. I'll get to that 1 second. Really, even the climate narrative says these are the worst winds in about 10 years. That's a decade. That's not a lot in a weather cycle. And in case you haven't figured it out, you idiots that run our state, we've been having fires long before I was born. This is not unprecedented. It happens. California is judged to be, by the federal government, you can look it up, the most likely state to have a natural disaster. That's not even and they said, oh, that's why we ran out of water. We just didn't think this was going to happen. What are the odds of no rain in January? Because it only happens every 4th year. What are the odds of a fire? Because they only happen every year. But Scott, what really got me ticked off?
I give. What?
This poor fellow
Bureaucrat.
who's being asked questions about, not hardly even call him a bureaucrat, was being asked questions about why is Karen Bass iguana, when's she coming back? And I've got to ask everybody out there, where the hell were the rest of the Democratic elected officials, since that's mainly how we have elected? No member of the Board of Supervisors out there that I saw. No member of any Democratic elected official from anywhere. In fact, no elected official standing. And the Democrats have all the seats, so you couldn't get your posterior out there to lead the public. And I want to give a tip, by the way, to those up-and-coming Democrats that think they're going to win either by stuffing or stealing the ballot box, or simply that everybody forget. You really did screw up today, because you had a chance to show up and at least get some name recognition, and apparently you didn't even have the guts to do that. And you saw what guts Bass had even at the airport when she showed up and said, Scott, give me a quote from Karen Bass.
Karen Bass, I don't know. Oh yeah, wait a minute.
Nothing.
He said nothing.
Exactly. That's your sound. That's the sounds of silence. We should have the producer roll in with the old Simon and Garfunkel song. Nothing.
Exactly. There's 15 members on the LA City Council. Not one of them stepped up. There's 5 members of the LA County Board of Supervisors. Not one of them stepped up. And a lot of these forest areas are in the county, not just the city. The homes tend to be in the city, but a lot of these forest and fire areas are all county areas.
And let's talk about that. Because that's another thing that chops my hide. Since January 20th, we have Mr. Trump going back in office. Thank you, Jesus.
Right. They're trying to de-Trump or Trump-proof the state. In the meantime, it's burning down.
Well, hold on. So much narrative centered around the fact that indeed the federal government has about 2/3 of the open forest land in California. And Newsom was like, well, the feds should clear it. And Trump's like, can you take care of your state land? And Newsom's like, you have 2/3 of the land. And indeed they do. But let's be clear on something. Most of that federal land, like in Yosemite, to cut a picture for you, is nowhere near where people live. The land outside of Pacific Palisades, to your point, is state and county land, which they have to clear themselves. This has nothing to do with the federal government.
Yeah, as it's really the state's fault. The state, they're giving water to the Delta smelt up there rather than sending it down. We should have learned from the Pacific Palisades fire up in Northern Cal, from your fire down in San Diego, that when the fire happens, because no one's doing any kind of forest management, which Trump criticized Newsom again about today, nobody's going out there and clearing the undergrowth, doing controlled burns or doing any of those kinds of things. And you can't really do controlled burns in Southern California in this brush. You have to clear it in other ways. And they're not doing that, though. They're letting the fuel build up. And then they limit the amount of water because they're worried about the Delta smelt. I mean, give me a break. Look, insurance companies are dropping people's insurance. I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of the people that had houses burned down today don't have insurance because the insurance companies said
many won't have insurance and they're worried about the state fund, etc.
And that's the state's fault because the state changed the regulations and said you can't charge based on risk. You have to be reasonable in your charges. And so the insurance company goes, oh, crap, we can't make money. We'll just leave the state.
It's interesting to note when we talk about things, and I want to paint this picture for you because, again, it's the government's job to have a plan. I would almost prefer the infrastructure of government, not Mike and Scott. Sorry, Scott. Figure out how to save most of California from a disaster. Now, I want to paint a picture for you so you understand what I'm talking about. This is how ill-prepared the government was for Pacific Palisades, where a lot of rich people, many of them liberals, live and not paying attention. So they ran out of water in the fire hydrants. The water tank, the single water tank, holds 3.5 or 3 million gallons of water. And they were like, oh my God, we just didn't expect it. Hold on one second. Now understand that the infrastructure that pumps this water is over 100 years old, as Gavin Newsom wants us to build on top of it. And when you go to a major hotel or any office building, and Scott, I want you to correct me because you're the architect here, isn't the water system that pumps the overhead sprinklers a separate water system from the one I say I use to flush my toilet and wash my hands?
Yes, it's separate. And oftentimes, especially if it's in a high rise, the high rise has to have its own water source, either a pump in the ground in the basement, and a diesel driven pump to drive it, or sometimes they'll put it up on the roof and like gravity flow. But because of earthquakes out in Southern California, they tend to be down at the ground floor with a diesel powered pump to pump it. So even if you lost all your power and you lost the connection to the water and they were no longer supplying it, they have to have a certain amount of water on site with a way to pump it up into the system.
So I want you to think of something that Pacific Palisades had no backup for that. Now we've got our San Francisco person on. I'll bring her on in 1 second, Magdalena. But before I go there, I want to finish this thought. Again, I've stated earlier, you can look this up. They rank each one of the 50 states and areas as the most likely to have a big disaster about every couple of years. California, due to our size, earthquake, fires, the possibility of a plane crashing, God forbid, is always ranked number one with a bullet because we have a lot of people. If something big happens in Wyoming, God bless you, Wyoming, but you've got a lot of land and 750,000 people. Now, I want you to
If that.
envision how ill prepared the state is. Forget even COVID, where Newsom was supposed to be prepared, which was a slow ticking disaster. One water tank above Pacific Palisades supplying a lot of people. Fair enough?
Right?
What if a plane hit that water tank or a terrorist hit that water tank? That's all they've got. I was actually surprised to hear that this morning. I'm like, that's it? The water tank is empty? And you're like, holy crap, we never thought this could happen. That to me is very scary and shows how the people that have been running the Democrats Los Angeles have no vision. I know Magdalena Magdalena disappeared.
I was just saying the fact that they let it get so empty. Forget the redundancy thing of having two tanks or whatever, but having a single tank, as long as it's big enough and can supply the needs. But it wasn't full. They didn't have enough water, and they can't pump it up the hill fast enough to fill it up to be able to supply the hydrants. It was a management disaster, and it's all the bureaucrats' fault. It's all the electeds' fault. Hey, you know what? If we keep electing, Democrats, and we have a blue city, you got to expect that it's going to be run like Democrats run things, crappy. And if we want to change it, we got to elect somebody else. There's not a lot of other options. And LA city elections are going to be this year. We should be able to do something.
Yeah, I want to try to bring Magdalena in right now, but for some reason it's not. It's hitting me with report. I don't know why that is.
Poor
I
Magdalena.
don't want to report Magdalena. I want to bring Magdalena. Dan, can you bring in Magdalena just to talk?
She's got to be risen to a panelist.
Well, she can be allowed to talk, actually, before risen to a panelist.
Isn't technology wonderful? Hey,
Uh,
what is it that I read that LA Fire was giving away their excess equipment to Ukraine? Did you hear that?
yes, go ahead and talk about that. I'm going to try to get Magdalena, the numbers. It's in the invite that I sent you. It is too long to text. So I don't know. Dan, do you have a way to bring Magdalena in and allow her to talk?
So Ukraine, evidently, fire departments, they try and keep their equipment current. And then the current frontline equipment, they always try to take the equipment that they've taken out of service and use that for backup and locate that backup equipment in strategic locations, like Pacific Palisades, where you could have a big brush fire. The Angeles National Forest, that's what they would do. They would stage those pieces of extra equipment in strategic areas. And then obviously if they've replaced some, then the third generation, let's call it, that they're taking out of service that's been an extra for however long, it might be 20 years old or whatever, then they declare that surplus and send it overseas. But obviously what's happened here and the demand for equipment has meant that they didn't keep enough backup equipment. And so that equipment that they needed today and yesterday is gone. It's in Ukraine. Yes, you have to maintain it. Yes, I mean, you can't do like Governor Newsom and take the emergency warehouse and decide, it's too expensive to maintain and we'll just let it stay. And then have a bunch of masks for COVID that just turn into dust and disintegrate when you pick them up. You still have to maintain the equipment. You can't just place it in certain locations. And that means, you've got to run this equipment, you got to operate this equipment. I mean, this equipment is a bunch of heavy duty, pumps and hydraulics and diesel motors that don't like being sat down doing nothing for, months and months, much less years. So the more equipment you have, the more you have to maintain it. But they obviously need to have enough equipment to handle emergencies, and they didn't. So Ukraine got equipment that we could use today. Maybe we
Right.
should.
And then the same with helicopters, by the way. I want to add, excuse me, California has had helicopters on order for not Blackhawks, but the equivalent of big water carrying helicopters. And by the way, helicopters are better. They've been using them in Orange County for years because they could fly straight up, don't worry as much about the wind, and don't have to go back to the lake. They could vertically pull water up. California has very, very few of them. And to your point, they could have sent some of the ones from Ukraine and used them to protect Americans.
So they didn't keep the right equipment or enough equipment, and
Correct.
paying the price now because they can't put it out. We don't have water in the hydrants. Well, if we had more helicopters, they can fly into the reservoirs, they can fly into the lakes or even the ocean, pick up water and drop it. They don't like using salt water when possible, but there's a lot of it out there right at the Pacific Palisades. So it's not like they were short water. They just couldn't get it onto the fire. And didn't have the equipment to be able, or personnel to be able to do that. And these fires, that you've seen pictures of it, these flames are 3-4 stories high. These flames are just going nuts. There's so much fuel there. It's turning the landscape to glass afterwards. It's just a black glass when the fire's already there. You've seen some of the pictures of what Malibu looks like now. All of those homes, watch it. They're gonna, mark my words here, they're going to add disaster onto disaster, because I'll bet you the Coastal Commission doesn't let them rebuild. So insult to injury, they burn, their house burns down, they lose everything, and Coastal Commission isn't going to let them build it back because it's too close to the water. And they don't like them there. They didn't like them there. And now that they're gone, good riddance, you can keep it gone. And you watch the fights that are going to come up because of that. And Newsom will let it happen because he doesn't know how to lead.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of I'll try to put Magdalena on through my phone.
Uh-oh. So now we've got looting happening in Pacific Palisades. So as they evacuate, the looters all know that there's nobody there to stop them, and they're in there looting. And they've been, thankfully, the county sheriff has actually been arresting them, unlike before, like when we had our BLM riots, mostly peaceful protests where they lit our cities on fire. The cops didn't arrest them because the city councils wanted to defund the police. So thankfully, we have enough county sheriffs that they're out there doing the looting. But in the old days, looters were the most despicable kinds of thieves to prey on people in a catastrophe where it's their choice of life or property, and they choose their life, and someone comes in and steals their property. And looters,
and they should have called in the National Guard like right away, because that was happening back in 2007. I'm going to call Magdalena, let her get a little blast off here.
And and it used to be, you'd have a severe penalty. You'd shoot looters on site. And that tended to stop the looting. Funny how that worked.
Magdalena.
Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm going to put you on speakerphone. We got you up on here. Okay. So give us a quick Los Angeles report. We're giving you the LA report. Give us a San Francisco report. It's obviously a bit of a hellscape down here. So let us know how your guys up there. What are you hearing? What are you hearing about it in the San Francisco area, the fires in LA?
It is a mess. It is just a friggin' mess right now. It is just crazy. You guys are burning to the ground. And, Gavin Newsom took $60 billion anyway. He don't care. I remember, I think, Mike, you said I can mention this, that your house burned down, I think, in 2007,
Correct.
and they still haven't compensated anything. And that's going to compensate for this either. It's a mess.
Right. So, I mean, when things happen up like in San Francisco, you probably see the same thing. Is the San Francisco press calling out the Democrats at all for what's going on, or is it just like business as
Just
usual?
calling Gavin Newsom. You know, Gavin Newsom is this what if Gavin Newsom does his job as governor, this would even be happening. And 2017, I think 2017, or why does this keep happening? We know we have he keeps cutting the budget, and then he uses the money for himself, and that's why we have the problems we're having.
Indeed.
San Francisco today inaugurated our mayor, who has ties to Gavin Newsom. So we were busy at a mayor inauguration today on January 8th. So, and this guy is tied to Gavin Newsom beyond belief.
Well, the mayor of Los Angeles was in Africa, just returning by phone. Magdalena, by plane. Magdalena, I'm gonna let you go because this connection is kind of awkward. Next week we'll fix it up a little better. God bless you and thank you. Give us your radio plug where we can find our shows and yours.
TSS, Digital Broadcasting Radio, coming at you from San Francisco and beyond.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week.
Magdalena.
Love you guys.
The audio was so poor that when she started singing her jingle, we totally lost it. Next week, we'll make up for it.
Yeah, next week we'll make up for it. I know it's been that kind of day. I guess my audio was. Anyway, so this is what we're facing in California right now. And I think the fact that we're facing a government that we didn't even cover the fact yet. Let's talk about Bass and the budget.
Which part?
Well, Bass cut the fire department's budget by close to $20 million this year. That's the fire department's budget. And you said this when you and I were talking. You want to bet that no immigrant has missed a meal?
Well, I'm thinking also that the DEI department probably is using a lot of that budget, and they're so worried about pronouns and making sure that we have some gay firefighters that they don't care about the overall budget. I mean, give me a break. I know what they were doing. They were putting tampons in the boys' bathrooms in schools. Much better than the fire department. We don't need no stinking fire department. Come on. There's never a fire here. When was the last fire? 10 years ago? I don't know, but it's not good.
Okay,
So-
we got actually fires bursting out all over LA right now. I'm getting a bunch of texts. Serunion Canyon is on fire up in the Hollywood Hills. La Canada is now on fire. I've got pictures up here. It's not good.
Okay, so let's summarize a little bit. First, we have Newsom, who's spending money on tampons in the boys' bathrooms, not really fully funding things, sending water out to the fish. Now, so that people understand, when we talk about sending it out to the fish, what he's doing is he's taking water in our reservoirs, which is limited because we're in a drought, and he's putting it down the river because the fishy down there are suffering from the drought too, and if they let the water level get too low, they'll die. And so the water is going out to the ocean and helping the fish along the way instead of coming down the aqueduct and filling our reservoirs. Then Newsom, as well as the feds, as well as LA County and LA City, have not done any kind of fuel modification. So like you in your house in San Diego, the fire department said you had to do a fuel modification area around your house. In other words, don't put flammable trees around it. Make sure it's well irrigated and keep it away from the building. Don't put some big eucalyptus that's going to go up like a match right next to your house. But they don't go out into the forest and actually do fuel modification either. So you had wet years, you had huge amounts of fuel, You didn't have water to fight all of the fuel. You got insurance companies that are leaving the state. Many of these homes, I think we're going to find were not insured because they were canceled because of the regulations coming out of Sacramento by the politicians on insurance companies, making it so that they couldn't earn money. So they left the state. Why should they do it otherwise? So we've got, and then you have hydrants not working. You have Karen Bass out of the country. You have all of this equipment that wasn't where it needed to be, or it wasn't able to function because it didn't have what it needed. So it's like air upon air upon air. And then you get the bureaucrat out there saying, yeah, this is unprecedented. We haven't had one like this in 10 years. Well, we had the Paradise Fire. It wasn't that long ago.
Oh, we have the fire. This is I'm tired. I mean, a couple articles came out today, and it's wearying, more than a couple, trying to blame this on climate change. The reality is, to your point earlier, it's not what's going to happen in 100 years. It's about what's happening right now in the texts that I'm getting. People are losing their homes. They're being evacuated. And the government, it is your job again to prepare for what we should be surprised at. Again, it could be a plane wreck. It's going to be an earthquake sooner or later, folks. Just like it's hurricanes down in Florida. Something bad is going to happen sooner or later. And the government officials, just like a lot of the utility officials, hope it's not in their watch. Why does it take Gavin Newsom close to 36 hours to call out the National Guard? In that time, when people evacuate their houses, like some of these big stars, this happened in my area way back when, 18 years ago. Gangs come in, organized gangs, and are a lot better today, and raid those homes because they know they got time between the time the people have evacuated and the place will burn to steal as much as they can. And simply, there are no air patrols. There's no one blocking the roads. There's no plan. And I think that's the part that's disaster preparedness. The Office of Emergency Services, CAOES. You can look it up. Has been underfunded. And there you go. Look at that. Scott, pull yourself aside for 1 second and show that.
I'll get out of the way a little bit. This is a satellite image of LA. LA is burning. And you see the clouds and everything, the fire still comes through. It is absolutely ridiculous that that we can't do something about it. But what are we going to learn about it? What are we going to learn from it? Are we going to go around and elect Karen Bass again? Are we going to elect somebody to replace Newsom that's just Newsom light? I mean, Rob Bonta and the other people that have thrown their hats in the ring for governor are worse than Newsom. They're not as sharp as Newsom, and Newsom is not a sharp tool. And he's still just a tool. But if we don't change our way of voting as voters, and we keep electing the same kind of people, expecting a different result, who's the stupid one now? We need to take action. We took action with Trump. He's taking office, hopefully January 20th. It can't come too soon, right? But if we can't do something like that in the state, we're toast.
And no matter who we elect, by the way, Democrat or Republican, we have to demand from our government. I was telling someone earlier tonight, the problem is, and I get it, we have short memories, okay? We don't remember I remember the 2007 fire because my house burned. People in Paradise, you remember, because they went through it. People in the Northridge earthquake in 98 remember it because they went through it, and we remind them of it.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that no matter who is in office, we must demand from them, when they talk long-term planning, not worry about what the climate's going to be in 150 years, but for what might happen tomorrow first, and to protect the life and limb of the people on the streets, whether it's crime, whether it's fire, whether it's a plane crash. We have to demand that government do its basic job. And that's the problem that we have, is that the left has taken us to this narrative of we're just going to keep growing, demanding more money, spending as much as we want, and lost sight of what their basic job is. You know, Scott, we pay a gas tax, right?
Huge gas tax, highest in the country.
Supposed to fix our roads, right?
Oh, we have the best roads in the country. Not.
Not. We have one of the worst rated roads in the country. Now, for many of you, and again, I'm speaking from experience, it's a little bit of an inconvenience. I get it a lot of days of the week. Tires wear out faster. You might bust a strut once in a while.
How about
But
takes
when the-
hours and hours and hours to commute?
But when you saw yesterday, when the roads aren't properly repaired, and properly maintained, it's a difference between life and death if you're trying to escape in a hurry. And we've all seen that when you watch these stories. And I've watched some of it pretty close, where that car couldn't get away fast enough because something happened. It could be long term or short term. A pothole makes it spin off the road, and a minor accident when there is a fire raging or an earthquake or a flood becomes someone's death. So their gas tax that you talk about, I want you to start thinking of a little bit. It might be your next life insurance.
But we have high-speed rail that goes nowhere, has no tracks, and no train. But we're spending billions and billions of dollars on that and not building more reservoirs, which we, as voters, authorized the state to do, have not built one new reservoir. We've taken 2 reservoirs and shut them down and emptied them and busted up the dams so they can't be reservoirs anymore. So when we as the voters, when we vote for things like, hey, let's build more water storage, we actually have less because Newsom cut them out rather than built them. And no one's following up. You don't see any press reports on that. And when we run out of water, like we did in Pacific Palisades, then you're going to yell. But then you'll get over it and life will go on. And Newsom's counting on that. And the Democrats are counting on that. So we get what we pay for in a lot of ways. Who's beeping?
We have to start understanding and holding officials responsible for doing their job. And remember that those elected officials, and this isn't about the frontline fire person, first responders, we become happy to call them, putting their lives on the line, God bless them. This has become about like the bureaucrat who's now head of DWP, who we had to get a better executive in Los Angeles last year. And so we hired a random person. I'm going to leave it at that, not so random. And we took the pay from $450,000 a year to $750,000 a year. And that person is responsible in much of Los Angeles, the Department of Water and Power. I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
So is that guy going to get fired because
It's a woman, and she probably won't because we don't hold them accountable because we have short memories. And the people that should be firing them are the people that we are electing that don't even care anymore to spend their time like Gavin Newsom in the state of California, governing the state to which he was elected. And the people like Karen Bass who want to spend time in Los Angeles to where she was elected. It's sad. It is sad, really, not for all necessarily what we've discussed tonight, but it's very hard for me as a California citizen to point to the person that in a crisis like right now, who's our leader? Scott, who is the person that LA should at least look up to that I'm hoping to see on television to tell me what is going on and that there's some hope? Who is that person?
Hey, didn't you see Gavin Newsom's photo op earlier today? He came down, had his hands in his pockets, looked at the fire, and said, "Hey, we got an emergency declaration. See you later." He's a leader. That's the best you're going to get. What, you think Nancy Pelosi's going to come back?
No, that's my point. It's
We got a
kind of
bunch of
sad.
we got a bunch
We
of
need
relics
someone,
in Democrats.
maybe we the people, and this is what happens, by the way, get to know your friends, get to know your neighbors, regardless of political party. We the people need to make sure that we get a leader out of this. I sure wish Rick Russo was calling in and doing stuff today, and we didn't elect him.
Yeah, he did more than Karen Bass, and he lost the election. At least he was in town. It's ridiculous. So again, I ran for assembly last time, ran against a Democrat. The Democrat won. The rules on voting are stacked in Democrats' favor. There's so many things that they've done to ensure that they will be in monopoly control of California for years, if not decades to come, unless we, the citizens, rise up like we did across the country with Trump and say, we've just had enough. We're not going to do it anymore, and elect somebody else. But until that happens, until we get the Rick Russo's elected instead of the Karen Bass's elected, we're going to be stuck with the same old, and we'll be complaining about this every time something drastic happens. And what, Newsom's planning on having Trump and the rest of the country bail us out? That's not what Ron DeSantis did in Florida. He had assets where they needed to be, and he called out on them, and he didn't have people without power for much more than a week. And most of the time, it was less than a couple of hours.
And I want to add for everybody out there, as we kind of roll to the end here, having been through this and understanding something, and I've been in hurricanes, and I've told you this before, Scott, been in floods, been in earthquakes, and been in fires. And for everyone out there, God bless you. There's nothing like a fire. We don't know when it begins. We can't always see it coming. Unlike an earthquake, it keeps going, and we don't know when it ends. But I will also tell you out there, if you see this, no matter where you are, wherever you have friends, when they give you that warning, leave. No one, you cannot wait out a fire in the cellar like a hurricane. You can't go in a sturdy building and let it blow over like maybe you could from a tornado. You can't go in a building that Scott built and let it shake like the earthquake for 30 seconds.
Hey,
Fire.
sometimes
Go ahead.
you have to sit there and question, with as bad as California is and who we keep electing, is God sending us a message with these wins? I won't say that he's the guy behind the fire. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't spare a lot of other historical cities. Do we really expect him to spare us? Anyway,
We know these fires are coming. In the moment right now, where it doesn't seem like California or Los Angeles, and it will be Orange County, it will be San Diego, there's one in Coachella Valley, there will be a fire near you right now, that we have someone that we can look up to that is leading. That's something we need right now in the moment, like we had when the World Trade hit in 2001. We had leaders at 9/11. Once this passes through, I encourage you to help your fellow man, regardless of party, religion, etc. Having been through this, get through this, and let's look to our government to hold their feet to the fire, all puns intended, to make sure that they do proper planning for the next disaster, which is bound to come. God, nature, the forces that God provided us with, they're not going to tell us when they're coming. And in fire's case, we don't know when they're leaving. Scott, you want to add anything here as we roll to the end?
hey, we are our hearts go out to all those people who were caught by, I'll call it the ineptitude of the bureaucracy and the elected officials that have let us down, but they've lost their house. Maybe they've lost a loved one. And we want them to know that we're not trying to make fun of their plight or make light of their plight. In fact, we argue that they shouldn't have been in this situation in the first place if our elected officials were doing their job. So again, our heart and prayer go out to those people that have been affected by this fire, and hopefully everybody will continue to work together to put these fires out and to help those in need as we all come together to assist in spite of government, not because of government. And we have the ability in our own selves, not only to elect better people down the road, but to reach out to help. We don't need to have FEMA. We don't need to have the National Guard. We have us and our fellow neighbors. So reach out to a neighbor, help them in need, and pass it along to others.
God bless. Good night. Stay safe. Again, if something happens to your house or someone you know, please reach out to me at Nenner Mike on Facebook through Messenger. Having been through this, I'm not charging, not selling. I'm happy to coach people through the insurance process because you don't meet that many people who've had this happen. God bless you. Good night. Take care, LA. Take care, California. We'll be back next week, God willing.